What are we talking about today? So today's going to be a brief overview of the various buying intent signals and how outbound can work with inbound and marketing to really create signals that convert. So we're going to talk about the importance of how sales and marketing can come together to achieve these goals, especially when prospecting has become so much harder today. So as we're waiting for more folks to join in, we've got a quick intro poll for you. So are you currently using intent data in your outbound strategy? Would love to understand, where it fits into your prospecting strategy. Okay. So it looks like we've got a majority of people using it and still fine tuning the strategy. I'm sure our speakers feel the same way. I think it's always an ongoing process of fine tuning. Definitely interesting to see some folks not knowing where to start. So hopefully, as you follow along in this webinar, we'll give you a chance to give you some more insight. And then, yeah, a good amount of people as well exploring the idea to learn more. So thanks again for taking the time to attend and join with us today. So I'm going to kick off introductions. First, going to pass it over to Carlie to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Great. Thanks, Jacob. And thank you so much for letting me attend. I'm really excited for the opportunity to chat about this topic. I'm Carlie Cottle. I am a director of our mid market segment here at Gong. I've got four outbound teams specifically that roll up to me, and also our inbound team rolls up directly to me. But I've been in the business development space for about 7 years, previous companies at ClickUp and Adobe, but been at Gong for about a year and a half now. Thanks for having me join. Excited.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, Carlie. Casey, going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jacob, and thanks to the LeadIQ team. Super excited to talk to everyone today. My name is Casey Walsh. I lead our business development team here at G2. Similar to Carly, I have our inbound, outbound teams reporting up to me. I've been with G2 for a little over 2 years, but have been in the business development space about 6.5 years as well. Looking forward to getting things kicked off and talking through intent data.
Awesome. Thanks, Casey. And if you've been following along with the Lead IQ webinar series for the last little bit, Sean needs no introduction. But Sean, for those that are new listening in today, do a quick intro of yourself.
Thanks, Jacob. And super excited to be sharing the stage with such stars, Casey and Carly. So excited to be here with you two. But yeah, like Jacob said, I'm Sean Murray. I'm the director of sales development over here at LeadIQ. So I run our outbound, inbound functions, just pretty much everything to do with outreach is my focus. But once again, super excited to be on this webinar and dive into the topic of intent.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. And yeah, I'm Jacob Rouser. I'm the director of demand gen here. So partner with Sean here at LeadIQ to build out our outbound and demand gen and ABM strategies. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. So as we dive into the meat of the topic, I want to first start with some definitions because know we have some folks that are a little bit newer to understanding what intent is. So really, I break intent down into three separate categories. One is what I call first party intent, which is the intent data that you own. So you think of like website activities, how you generate cookies through your forms, all those pieces that you own. Second is what I call borrowed intent. And I think the clearest example we have of borrowed intent is G2. So we take G2's first party intent and layer it into our own tech stack. And it's why I call it borrowed intent. The last one I call third party intent. So that's searched intent. So you think of your intent providers like Bombora, Demand Based, Sixth Sense, where you're really taking a look at the market at large, seeing what search terms they're looking at, watching the trends data, and oftentimes layering in a component of AI to try to score and understand where these buyers are in the market. Heading into our first hot take poll of the conversation today, is cold outreach dead? I'm curious to get the audience's perception here. And while we're waiting on that to come in, Sean, let's pass it over to you to start with.
Yeah. So when we think about cold outreach, from the traditional sense, yeah, I think it's dead. We're not really reaching out cold when we're prospecting. We have so much information at our fingertips these days that help us to make that outreach a little bit more warm. So I would say in the traditional sense, cold outreach is dead. You're not going and door knocking on these people's doors or dialing through a phone book, right? You're pretty targeted in your approach these days.
Nice. Casey, going to pass it over to you now.
Yeah, I think Sean and I are probably pretty aligned on it. I think in the last several years, our industry has made strides to make sure that we're at least reaching out with something to say. There's LinkedIn, there's so many different tools, G2 intent data, for example. Sean said something that kind of resonated with me, and I actually said it the other day as well. Like, we're not using the yellow pages. You know who you're reaching out to. For example, if they're showing G2 intent data on your product, what college they went to, what they're posting on LinkedIn. There's a lot of different avenues, articles online about them. So there's a lot of different things that you can refer to when you're reaching out. So you're not just saying, hey, I'm so-and-so from G. You actually have something to say to them that's relevant to their role and why it's going to help their business.
Awesome. Carlie, over to you for your take on it.
Yeah. So I think I kind of have mixed feeling on this because I think there is like a volume component to prospecting. Do I think you could do the old methodology of kind of a spray and pray approach where you reached out to mass amounts of people with a generalized messaging and could probably get responses of that? Sure. But is it going to be with the right type of prospect, the right conversation, and the right accounts that you want to have? Probably not. And so I think when we think about a cold outreach, maybe to a prospect, it may feel cold if they've never talked to you. Maybe they aren't aware of your organization or the product value that you have. Sure, that could be the case. But I think as a seller or as a prospector, you really shouldn't be doing cold outreach. Like you should be doing your research. You should understand who you're targeting, what your value is, your messaging to that individual as far as what they care about in their persona, what they care about in their company, and what they care about in their role. So I think it depends on what type of outcome that you're wanting to have, which most of us want to have more conversations that are going to lead true pipeline and hopefully lead to revenue. And that comes with a level of really understanding your approach to outreach. And anytime that you can add relevancy to your prospects, that's going to drive a higher valued conversation than just a true spray and pray approach. So I would always lean on the side of personalization and making sure that it's relevant to who you're targeting.
Absolutely, and completely agree. As Sean and I talk about it, we talk about how do we start to change it from the idea of cold outreach to something warm. As Anthony just chatted in, intent plus relevancy. And I saw a great comment coming on the chat from Colby here. Without personalization based on trigger events, cold outreach is really tough unless you're in a highly commoditized space. So let's zoom in on that. We need to figure out, how do we start to warm up our prospects? How do we understand that intent plus relevancy? So, Sean, we've talked a lot about this, but would love for you to share a little bit on how do you coach your teams to go from cold to warm in their prospecting efforts?
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's really important to define what you need to be looking at and where you're accessing that information. So working really closely with the marketing team to figure out which accounts to target. I think one of the hardest things about cold outreach is account prioritization, right? For example, my team has roughly 6,000 accounts each. There's no way that they're going to be able to reach out to those 6,000 accounts, right? So how are we going from that 6,000 to enough for them to do their job, but really targeted in a sense of their approach and their messaging, right? So when we think about how I coach my team, I really think about personalization into three different layers, right? You think about personal, you think about company, and you think about industry. Personal is going to be like LinkedIn mentioned in a news article and or posted on LinkedIn, right? Anything that's happening to that specific individual. Then company is going to be like company news, funding rounds, company that actually posting on LinkedIn, anything that's related to that company, and then industry specific, like laws and regulations, industry news, anything that's specifically affecting that industry. So of course, personal is the best, and then industry is going to be the least layered of personalization. But you want to focus on those different layers in order to craft your message.
No, that's great insight, Sean. And then Carly, we talked a little bit during our prep sessions here about how do we balance out that personalization with scalability, and would love to get your take on how you approach that with your teams.
And I echo what Sean said. I think the more that you can be personalized at the individual level, the higher likely you are to get a response or to engage with a prospect. So I think that should always be your target, what we always coach to. But we also know not everybody has their information that's like readily available and saying, this is what I care about. Send me a message on this. If it was, everybody would be using it and doing it. So I think one of the things I would also stress is like really understanding your ICP. Like, who is your targeted prospect? What do they care about? What's most important to them? Sometimes I see a lot in prospecting where there's a lot of feature sharing. There's a lot of we make it about our product and not necessarily what the prospect cares about and what they're trying to solve and what their goals and business initiatives are. So the more that you can make it prospect focused and try to attach your product to the value that they're going to solve of what they care most about, the higher chance you have of getting them to respond. I think when I think about things that we, coach to or here at Gong, one of the biggest things that our product solves for is making sure that you're talking to the prospect about maybe previous conversations or previous interactions that they've had. What did they care about? What were they trying to solve in the past? One of the things with Gong Engage or some of our AI is we have the ability to be able to ask, hey, in past conversations, whether that was email, whether that was Zoom conferencing, whether that was social interactions that have happened, like what did this account care about? What was their top focuses? What were their business priorities? Or even on the individual level, we're able to surface some of that. And then being able to use that in your outreach is going to make it so much more relevant to the individuals. I think anytime that you can gather that information, whether it's internal data that you have and surfacing that, or external data through some of the third party or through LinkedIn, being able to tie that to your conversation is just going to help the likelihood of your prospect engaging in a conversation with you. So I think you need to use it all. I think you need to understand marketing and who they're targeting and what their messaging is, but also tapping into some of those additional resources is definitely going to help you in your outbounding.
Absolutely. I did see a couple of questions come in, but I do want to zoom in on one thing, Carly, that you highlighted there is it's all intent data. Oftentimes we can think that intent is what's being searched around the web or coming in from these external data sources. But the intent that you capture on the account level using tools like Gong, having that information captured in Salesforce is super valuable and super relevant for your ongoing prospecting needs. I know Sean and his team here layers in a lot of that for some of their highest converting sequences as well. So I'm going to take us a little bit off the outline here because we've got some really good questions in the chat. So Becky asks us, how reliable is intent data? So I'm going to give my perspective here first, and then turn it over to our intent expert, Casey, here to get his perspective too. The reason I break it out into those three categories is I think our first party intent data is the most reliable. It's owned, it's associated back to a visitor. That close behind that is our second party data. Due to certain laws and regulations, some of that second party data has to be anonymized with that. So a little bit of guessing comes back into that. And then I think the algorithms and tools have come a long way, but third party data is still the least reliable. I don't feel like you can take a third party search term. Let's say they're looking up business prospecting tools and you reach out to someone in Newark, New Jersey and say, hey, saw you were searching for business prospecting tools. That's, you're probably going to strike out on that one. But Casey, I would love to get your perspective on reliability and intent.
Yeah, so this is something that comes up in our calls all the time. And I think the importance is first, know the difference between first party, second party, third party. At G2, obviously we call it first party because it's our website. JQ calls it second party or borrowed intent. And really what our intent data does is it allows you to get information on an account level. So due to all the privacy laws, GDPR, for example, we can't say Jacob Rouser from Atlanta at LeadIQ is doing research on buyer intent platforms. That's illegal. So we cannot do that. But what we can do is say someone at LeadIQ in Atlanta is researching buyer intent platforms. And then that is on the sales rep or whoever's doing the prospecting to figure out, okay, I sell to someone in demand gen. I want to find someone in demand gen that works at LeadIQ in Atlanta. Okay, so there's however many people, I would say not that many at LeadIQ in Atlanta, Jacob.
Yeah, you would find me.
Yeah, there you go. And then you got your guy just like that. But yeah, in terms of like third party versus second party, I think the way, and Jacob did touch on this, but the way I like to explain it, and I also want to preface that I like all intent data. Like it's just more layers to the bigger picture. So obviously, if you can build upon all of that and look at it all together, it can give you a really clean picture. But what I will say is I'm a BDR manager. I want, imagine this is a fake story. I want someone to come in and teach or I should say, coach my reps how to sell. And I just do a simple Google search. And that all of a sudden I start getting millions of prospecting emails from sales coaching software companies that are saying, hey, I understand that you're looking into buying sales coaching software, when in reality, I actually just want someone to come in and teach my reps how to run a sales cycle. So that's the difference between third party. Second party is going to be more bottom of funnel, whereas third party is going to be more top of funnel. Bottom funnel meaning it's someone that's actually in an active buying cycle, who's doing the research, looking at different products on G2, comparing you to competitors. There's a lot of different signals that we can offer, and we'll get into those, I'm sure, a little bit later on the call, but each one is going to call for a different response time SLA.
Yeah.
Hopefully I answered your question, Becky.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I touch on a really good point about the various SLAs. Speed to lead is a very real thing. We see that the sooner you can follow up with a intent signal, the sooner it is to convert into an active opportunity. Greg, I'm going to touch on your question here in a second, but I think Casey outlined something that Sean and I spend a lot of time talking about, is this whole idea of active versus latent intent. And Casey, I think you were talking a lot more about how can we sift through these various signals to uncover what is an active opportunity. So Sean, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about your philosophy there.
Yeah. So, and when you think about active versus latent, right? Active is going to be like a true hand raiser. They have an active project going on. They're actively searching for a solution. They know they need your solution or something like your solution. When you think about latent, which is most of outbounding, they have no idea about your solution, but you called them up and you are able to generate interest, and you understand that they have pain that you can solve. And that there's actual need there, right? But there is not necessarily an active project. So when you think about active, it's mostly going to be inbound, and then outbound is going to be mostly latent. So it's really important for outbound teams to really understand that there is latent need, especially when you think about opportunities and qualifying opportunities and so on and so forth.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I feel like we're focusing in and talking a lot about, because there's only so much time in the day to do these sales motions. It's a metaphor of 1,000 monkeys banging a typewriter. How long is it going to be before you get Shakespeare? So a lot of it comes down to how do we prioritize and filter out all these signals. So I'm going to tie this to Greg's question here. So Greg is curious about who out there has goals, expectations for their teams around outreach volume on a weekly or monthly basis. And then how do you balance that with ensuring BDRs are taking the time to personalize? So, Carly, we touched on this a little bit earlier in the call today, but again, would love for you to talk a little bit more on how you and your teams balance out that equation.
Yeah. I think this is always a balance, right? Like in an ideal world, we would love to personalize every outreach. I don't think, one, that's possible. And two, I don't think that it's always necessary. So I think this is where helping your BDRs or your sales teams, like again, narrow down and really understand their ICP. We always coach if there's certain titles or personas within an account, or you've done the research and you found really relevant information, you should always use that, right? I would never want to go in cold, even if I could find something that maybe I wasn't quite sure of the accuracy. At least it gives me a talking point to at least get a conversation started. So I think if there's certain industries that have a high success rate in, or that you close a lot of revenue from, or there's certain personas that you tend to get an initial conversation in that helps you grow or expand within that account, those should always take precedence in prioritization. I also think that there are some accounts or maybe industries or different personas that maybe they're just conversations that you want to have within the account, but maybe you don't have a lot of information or you don't have a lot of past conversations or a lot of research on. Maybe it's not necessarily personalized to the individual, but it's personalized to that persona because their pains, their challenges that you could likely get into a conversation by personalizing it at the persona level versus the individual level, which I think you can absolutely do that at scale. So I think there's different approaches that you can take. The other thing I would say there too is I look at prospecting as more of an omni channel approach. So it's not just a one avenue for prospecting. We know at Gong, we have research that shows it takes anywhere from 13 to 16 touches to get in touch with a contact or to get in touch with a prospect, right? So if you're only targeting just through the phone or only targeting via email or you're only doing social, you likely need to change your approach because in this world, like there's so many different avenues to reach out. There's gifting, there's team links, there's referrals, there's of course emails, calls, all of the traditional methods, but you never know at any given point of what's going to resonate. We're using texting, we're using voicemails, you have to have a variety or an omni-channel approach to your prospecting, and we typically find doing that is going to lead to a higher response rate or a connect rate than just the traditional avenue of I only call or I only email. So I would also look at your cadence to ensure that one, where does it make sense to personalize and with who does it make sense to personalize? And then two, how do we make sure that we've got different levels of or different channels of ways that we can engage prospects?
Absolutely. And I really think that's where the modern go to market motion has headed, right? It's no more of marketing's over here, only focused on field events, where sales is over here, hitting the phone, sending out the emails. It's all how we can come together and put together those playbooks that make sense. So we go after the right person at the right time. So I want to take us into a playbook that we use here at LeadIQ that piggybacks off of the G2 data. So what we do is we have a G2 report that's rolled out for every SDR and AE that rolls back on a 7-day basis. So let's say there is a prospect comes in, looks at us at a direct competitor. Sean's team will then initiate a sequence to do a competitive displacement. And we have a specific sequences set up for each of those track components. One of the things I wanted to follow that on is this whole idea of explicit versus implicit intent signals. So again, that kind of ties on this topic of who's hand raising versus what is that passive layer and how do we prioritize that? So again, Sean, I know we've turned on a lot of intent signals to the team in the past couple of weeks. So how do you coach your team when all of a sudden they're getting inbound notifications, they're getting these G2 notifications, they're getting these demand-based reports hitting them every single day? How do you help them prioritize?
Yeah, when it comes down to it is first you've got to define with marketing what is top priority, right? Marketing and sales needs to come together and determine what they should be reaching out to first, right? So that's going to be the first thing that they reach out to first. Then I think it comes down to support, making sure that you can action this intent data as easy as possible. So for us, supplying sequences, messaging, talk tracks, everything like that, at least it gives them a starting base as to actually action this information, right? I think when it comes down to prioritization, of course, when we think about it, we're going to prioritize. We know for a fact that inbounds convert higher, right? So we're going to reach out to those as fast as possible. Then we're going to start looking at other different signals going down from there, like G2 intent data, right? So I think the biggest thing with outbound, right, is you need to be able to answer, why are you reaching out? That's the number one thing you need to be able to answer. But I think where intent comes in and all this information that we have out there is being able to answer why now. That's even better than the why, right? So you want to try as much as possible with cold outbound outreach, right? Cold outreach to answer that why now. So that's what intent data supplies. And that's how we prioritize accounts is the accounts that we can answer why now. Those are the ones that we're going to be reaching out to first.
No, that's a great point. I think that takes us to a really nice segue to the next topic here, interpreting our intent signals. Sean, like you're saying, how do I figure out why now? How do I arm the team with the various resources? So leading into our hot take section for our hot take poll for this section, marketing teams should be held accountable for sales revenue. Agree or disagree? So we'll give folks a couple seconds to respond in here. As a marketing leader myself, I strongly agree with this here, but I'll wait for a couple of votes to come in and then turn it over. Oh, so I see a lot of strong agreement here. So, Carly, I'm going to turn it over to you first for your take on this.
Yeah. So I agree with what the majority said. I think when I look at it from a prospect's point of view, it's one brand, right? They don't think, oh, I'm just engaging with your sales team. They may have engaged with your content via an event, via a webinar, via a download or some source that way. So whether it's a sales individual or marketing individual, it's one brand to the prospect. So I absolutely think those things need to work in tandem. I think aligning on the different campaigns that are running from the marketing team and what the message is going to the market and making sure that your sales organization and or your business development organization is aligned with that same messaging. That's how you're going to ensure that there's alignment between those two groups. I absolutely think marketing plays a role in driving revenue, and then how the sales teams treats what marketing is producing is just as valuable. You mentioned speed to lead. You mentioned how the prospect choose to interact with us via a campaign or via an event, making sure that as sales reach out, that there's messaging that's relevant to that. And so it feels like one experience for the prospect. So they really do go hand in hand. We're going to receive inbounds from the marketing team. And then we're also going to leverage some of that to go outbound. I know a lot of my teams, we do a lot of multi-threading. We may get inbounds from the marketing team that maybe aren't at the level that we want to engage at within an account. We know that we've got to get to power. We know that we've got to talk to decision makers or champions. So we can use that inbound as a signal for where we should be spending our time to go multi-thread, because conversations and decisions at companies aren't made by one person anymore. There's research that shows it takes 6 to 10 decision makers to buy a product or to buy a solution. And so I think it's naive to think that the one person that raised their hand is going to be the only person that's going to evaluate or that your product is likely going to influence. And so being able to use those signals to drive additional interest within those accounts is super, super important. And that's what's going to add velocity to any of your deals or anything that you have in flight or within pipeline. But I think they go tandem. I think sales organization obviously owns the revenue, but I think marketing plays a big part in that too.
Absolutely. And I think really with the focus towards account based, those vanity metrics aren't really valuable anymore. It's, are we making impact on the accounts that matter most to us? And is it converting eventually to revenue? Sean, I'm going to pass it over to you for your take on this.
I definitely think that, yes, I agree. But I also think it comes down to like how you set up your organization from an attribution standpoint, right? If marketing influences an opportunity, they need to be tagged to that opportunity. So I think it also comes down to how you attribute it. That's where issues start in organization. Who's attributed this? Who's attributed that? Who gets credit here? Who gets credit there? So instead of going that route, you need to align it as one team. Why not give both people credit? Yes, it was an outbound prospecting effort, but it was influenced by marketing. So why not give both credit? So I think it comes down to aligning from an organizational standpoint. I've been part of organizations where they do this really well. I've been part of organizations where they do this really poorly. Guess which one succeeds? You can probably guess that right off the bat, right? So I think it's really important to set that standard up and ensure that you have the right practices in place so everyone, gets the recognition that they deserve.
Absolutely. And thanks, Shauna. Casey, I'll turn it over to you here in just a second. But I think one of the things that's really important to remember is understanding too, like how are the various teams compensated, right? I never, when working with my SDR teams, I never wanted to take food out of their mouths, take dollars out of their paycheck by saying, hey, marketing actually owned this opportunity. But two, when you look at it from the marketing side, we're often comped on a quarterly basis on whether or not we're achieving our quarterly goals. And so when you have that kind of laser focused mindset of, all right, it is the same team, we're creating mutual accountability, right? Rising tide floats all ships to take a kind of tired metaphor out of it. So with that being said, Casey, would love to turn it over to you for your hot take and then learn just a little bit more about how sales and marketing alignment works at G2.
Yeah, I would definitely say I'm in agreement with both Sean and Carlie. Both of them said a few things that resonated with me and how we do things. So I guess we can hop into that. Something that we've made, and we're super lucky to, we get along very well with our marketing team. I know some sales departments don't. I'm lucky to say that we work very well with them. Something that we've put in a lot of work this year and last fiscal year is to remove that culture of credit. Oh, I got this, or this is me, I sourced this. It's all one team, one dream. We win as a team, we lose as a team. And as much as marketing needs sales to close the deals that they're bringing in, sales needs marketing for a lot of different things. There's, as someone who used to sell, I am so fortunate that I was able to work with marketing teams to come up with content that I could add in my sales emails, because I would not be the right person to be talking to about that. There's a lot of different things like that where some people might get a little fussy over that credit. So it's finding out, okay, this is sales influence. This is BDR prospecting, for example. This is marketing influence. They can both attribute to the same deal. And at the end of the day, that's what we need to be caring about, is whether or not this deal closes. And if it doesn't close, okay, let's figure out how we can pick it back up and engage the right people and work together as a team and multi-thread. That's really what it all comes down to. And I think Sean and Carlie touched on it, but if I'm reaching out to a director of demand gen about G2, we are going to hopefully touch all other teams at that organization, from Sean's team in BDR or product marketing or just normal sales teams, even customer success, to reduce churn when one of your customers is looking at maybe one of your competitors. Those are all important things to think about, because it's not just going to be one person, like Carlie mentioned. There's going to be a lot of different stakeholders that you need to get in touch with. So a marketing inbound lead from someone in demand generation, that's great. I'm going to add them to the conversation that I'm trying to set with Sean's team in business development.
No, you hit the nail on the head, Casey. That's why selling has become so complex in today's economy. It's not only multi-threading, it's also a multi-channel strategy that we're talking about. Then you all of a sudden add in this component of intent data, and it becomes vastly more complex because you're looking at all these various opportunities to turn on triggers. Then you're reaching out to these various people. You've got dedicated sequences for above the line, for below the line. And it's a lot for, especially because sellers tend to be, particularly within SDRs, more junior employees. That's a lot for a 20 something to come in and wrap their head around. And that's why I think great sales leaders are great sales coaches. Really take that mentor first mentality. Carlie, that was one of the things we talked about. Like, how do you help your team not waste their time when they're getting all data, have so many things that they need to do in a day?
Yeah, that's it's always a challenge. And I feel like it's a challenge for any seasoned sales professional too, right? It's easy to chase the shiny object, but I think again it goes back to uh why are you reaching out, and then where does your company or product add value, and aligning to your ICP. I can't stress that enough in really understanding that, because that's what again is going to get the attention of your prospects. I think some of the things that we use, similar to what Sean and Casey have mentioned, of the different buckets of things that you can look at, whether that's leads that are coming in, whether that's past users of your product, if that's like a user gems, if that's any information that you can gather on LinkedIn to help you prioritize. I always tell my team, I'd rather you go where the conversation is going to be warmest. And that can be warmest as triggers or information that they found, whether that's looking at a prospect's website, whether that's looking at their recent press release, whether that's looking at a 10K if they have initiatives, or is further as them coming inbound or raising their hand or showing interest that way. I think the one thing at Gong, and again, I feel really fortunate to work at a company that's developed a product that's based on live interactions. All of our intent data is based on what we have captured and gathered through conversations with prospects, right? Yes, there's a little bit of guesswork. We have third party intent data that we absolutely use, but my SDRs can use, we have an ask me anything feature within Gong where they can, on an account level or on a prospect level, hey, tell me what Casey cared about in our last interaction with them. And that could be from 2 years ago. And it will surface, these are the top three things that Casey cared about in the last conversation that we had. Or what were the biggest top priorities for this account last time we engaged with them? And then it surfaces that. There's also a lot of technologies out there that help do this at scale. Obviously, Gong Engage and Gong platform has a lot of those AI models written in where you can, say these were the top three things that this account or this prospect cared about. Help craft a relevant information or a relevant message to this prospect. So I think anytime that you can leverage technology or that information to help you do this quickly and efficiently, it's going to help you do this with more prospects. But you do have to narrow down your team's focus, whether that's through, I think somebody mentioned too about tiering accounts, whether you use third party data to do that, whether your sellers tier them, but any type of way that you can narrow that focus and then use tools and technology to help you personalize at scale. That's really the winning ticket. But there's lots of different places that you can pull that intent data from. And it's what you find most successful based on your prospecting motion or your selling motion.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that insight. And I think that takes us, A, will answer the question here in the chat, but then takes us really nicely into the last segment that we have here about incorporating signals and understanding the playbooks that we can convey. So first, before we dive into our next hot take, I want to take a second to chat a little bit more about frameworks and proven methods. So Sean, I know you and I have spent a lot of time talking about this. Carlie outlined one of the things that has been doing well, previous employees and leveraging LeadIQ's track capability. So we'd love to get your kind of perspective here. What are some of those frameworks that have worked, and would love for you to tell the story of what's been working for your team?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you think about frameworks and everything like that, it all comes down to testing. So you gotta be testing at all times to see what works. And unfortunately, sorry to everyone on this call, like there's no silver bullet to outreach or one way to do things, and I can give it to you today, and then you're all of a sudden going to generate X amount of results, right? There's nothing out there that's like that, right? So really, it comes down to testing and tweaking and testing and tweaking, right? For example, Jacob already mentioned this. We're running plays specifically around G2 intent data when someone's looking at our competitor. So we'll take that information and then throw that person into a sequence, not saying, hey, we saw you were searching. us versus our competitor. It's no, here's some more information and going more around the educational route as to what are the differences, why we're better here, why they're better there. So just educating the prospect. And then comes down to some of the things that Jacob and I have been running on the side testing is Jacob's been running ad campaigns specifically on LinkedIn for a target set of accounts. And then I would be reaching out specifically with messaging around the type of content that Jacob has those on those ads, right? And we've seen pretty awesome results when it comes down to incorporating these intent signals as well as using it within our messaging. So we got 100% open rate on some of these cadences and these sequences right now. So clearly, when marketing is running their efforts and then you combine it with sales, you're going to start to notice that your brand is everywhere in that prospect's mind. I'm sure you guys see on Instagram when something starts to target you, it's everywhere and it's all you think about at all times. That's what we want to be doing with our accounts here. And that's why I think we're seeing the results that we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like Carly said, for our prospect, it's all one experience. It may look like a very fractured thing internally, but again, we have to take the buyer's mentality first. And I say, I see brands sometimes when they're really trying to struggle for pipeline, they end up doing what I call like schizophrenic branding, where all of a sudden they try this and then all of a sudden creative shifts over here. And it ends up creating a lot more confusion. A lot of times I tell brands and things that I consult with, like stick to your guns. Does this provide value to the prospect where they are? If yes, stick to it to a certain extent and stay the course when you can. So lastly, we're going to talk about incorporating signals into our personalized outreach. So the final hot take poll of the conversation today is personalization is a waste of time, meaning no increases in opens, responses, or meetings booked. So curious to see almost immediately 16 votes disagreeing here. All right, we got a brave soul that agrees personalization is a waste of time. Awesome. All right, so we see a pretty overwhelming. Okay, a couple more votes coming in for the agree. So let's talk about it. Sean, would love for you to kick this one off, seeing what we're seeing here.
Yeah. Throughout my entire career, personalization has been the only reason why I think I'm successful. Like for me specifically, when I'm doing any kind of outreach, I want to know everything that I can about them and then take what I've learned about them, whatever is relevant, and then incorporate it into my messaging, right? Also my talk tracks and everything like that. So I think it's essential when you think about increasing reply rates and increasing response rates. I've seen folks be super targeted with their outreach as well as spray and pray method. My activity volume was half the amount or a quarter of the amount to the people that were going to volume based. And then we were seeing higher results from my standpoint. So just putting that extra 1 to 2 minutes prior to doing some outreach, I say find 3 things out in 3 minutes. And that's all you need to be doing. 3 things out in 3 minutes to find out what you can use that is relevant in your messaging. Trust me, the conversations will be better. It's going to show the prospect you actually understand them, you understand their business. That when you get on the phone with them, if you show that you've done your research, it just makes everything flow a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Casey, would love to get your opinion here around where personalization fits for you.
Yeah. So when Callie said there's definitely a sweet spot, you have to toe the line. I don't think personalization is a waste of time. I'll just put that as the banner. I think it's very important. But if someone, I think I got one the other day that was talking about, because in my LinkedIn bio, I mentioned my dog and that I like going to Cubs games. And the person said something about like, how many games have you brought Grizzly to? And it's, my dog's 165 pounds. Like, I'm not bringing that dog to any Cubs games. And I don't even know what he said. I don't know what he was selling. So there's a sweet spot. So you have to make it personalized and specific to the person, the contact, and the account. And something that we were on the subject earlier about like the LinkedIn, the company account. Something that I did not hear said that my team utilizes a lot is you can see if they're hiring for new jobs. So being somebody that sells intent data, we want to see if they're hiring SDRs. Do we want to see if they're hiring account executives, demand generation folks? Because what does that tell you? That tells you that there's a huge focus for that company to build pipeline and generate opportunity. What do we have that can help them with that? We can provide them intent data that will allow them to do just that. But there's a lot of super creative ways to get personal and like connect with people on a personal level, whether it be a shout out to the school they went to. Obviously, right now there's March Madness going on for basketball fans. There's a lot of different ways to sprinkle in a little bit. You don't want to go too far into it. Just something that's going to catch their attention and hopefully get them to get on a call. One of my reps, I don't know if she might be on here, Melanie, she does something cool with people's names to catch their attention. So I think I said it in our walkthrough the other day, but like if she was reaching out to Jacob's last name is Rouser, she could say like, rouse the competition or like rouse opportunity, whatever it is to get creative, but using their name to be creative and have some fun with it. And that's going to at least get your open rates up because they're going to be like, all right, what is this email all about? But yeah, we've seen a lot of success with that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm seeing a lot of conversation happen in the chat here talking about this. Too much unrelated personalization is creepy. It ties us always back to where's the relevancy in this. So Carly, would love to get your take here on personalization and where it fits in your strategy.
I feel like I've mentioned a lot throughout the call. I think it is not a waste of time. Again, I think you need to pick and choose and understand where personalization makes the most sense based on who you're targeting or what type of an account that you're going after. The other thing that I would say too, and I agree with what Casey said, I think there's different fun and creative ways to reach out, but at the end of the day, you're going to need to be able to solve what a prospect cares about, right? Great that they went to a certain college. Great that you send them a gift. Those can absolutely capture their attention and get you in the initial conversation. But then you really have to understand and make sure that your value is crystal clear to the prospect. I think this is also an area where a lot of new SDRs or BDRs or new sellers can get sucked down a rabbit hole because sometimes there is so much information to look at or different places to go that you could spend all your time researching for the perfect trigger, for the perfect reason to reach out that then you end up not executing. Or maybe you spend a lot of time on a personalized email and then they don't respond and you can get discouraged. So that's where I think I liked what Sean said. We have a similar motto here, like 3x3, 3 pieces of information in 3 minutes. And you'll get faster as you start to understand what you're looking for and where you can typically find that information. But I would just challenge everybody not to over engineer it or overthink it, where you spend the majority of your time researching and not executing on just prospecting. I always say done is better than perfect. Even if you have the perfect personalization, it doesn't guarantee you're going to get a response. It should increase your likelihood. But I would just challenge everybody, know what you're looking for, limit your time on the amount of information that you're using, and then try to make sure that it's always tied to the value that your product can add. And don't get sucked down that rabbit hole of too much research because then you can really start to overthink it.
Yeah, no, I love that, Carly, and that's very much aligned with how I think about it too. I'll use the metaphor of arrows in a quiver, right? If you're a world class archer, you need to know which arrow that you're using, and you don't spend a ton of time lining yourself up on your target because if you take too long, you get muscle fatigue, your aim goes off. So it's about understanding what target am I aiming for? Do I have the right arrow? And then line it up and shoot. We've gotten some really good questions coming in on the QA. So I want to make sure we have the time to go into this conversation. So Leonardo asked us something we've actually talked a lot about here at LeadIQ in one of our previous webinars. But what do you think the role of the SDR and BDR will evolve into? So not sure if y'all have strong thoughts, but pretty much any SDR leader I've talked with has been asked that question. So I guess, Casey, let's turn it back over to you. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think I can just talk about how just at G2 it's changed over the last 12 months. In the past, we were a volume shop where we were sending thousands of emails every week. Again, like not very personalized and just like any contact in Salesforce, you're getting the same message. This year, we really pulled back the reins when it comes to emails that we're sending and outreach that we're sending. So now every email and every touch point that we're making has to have an intentional reason why you're reaching out. And I think we've seen a lot of early success on it. And it's been helpful because now if you get an email back, you're like, oh, shoot, like, what? I don't even know what I sent this person. Exactly what you sent this person, when the last opportunity was with that account, exactly what their role is, what they're going to care about, and why you sent them that email. And then when you create that opportunity, pass it off to the account executive, they are so much better prepared to handle that call than as if it's like just an unqualified opportunity that you sent out 400,000 emails to last week and you got some random person to respond to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Carly, what is your perspective on the changing role of the BDR or SDR?
Yeah. I think really at every company I've been in, I feel like it goes through an evolution. I think even when I started as an SDR 7 years ago, I even remember running certain campaigns and just loading people in there like a Marketo type of flow and just seeing if anything would stick. I think a lot of the prospecting we do now, our SDRs at Gong are aligned to an AE. And before we even start outreach, there's an account strategy, right? I loved what Casey said around there's intention behind our activity. We know why we're targeting this account. We understand who in the account we're going after. We understand what play we're going to run, whether it's a competitor play, whether it's a persona play, but there's intention behind the activity that we're doing. And I think maybe in the past it was just get every type of account or get every type of persona or get every certain title and just throw them in and see what happens. And now it's you're thinking about that more in depth than maybe you were in the past. And even thinking of the product to Engage, which was just built like it's all account based. It's focusing and understanding who you're targeting and why you're targeting them and making sure that it's relevant. And so I think you're going to continue to see that evolution happen. I think you're going to see more tools and technology support that approach, where in the past it was all about the volume game. And I think that's building that muscle, building that skill, being able to be an effective communicator, an effective writer, being able to understand what good research looks like and how to craft that in a messaging is always going to be a skill that you're going to develop in. And that's going to carry you through your entire sales career, right? And how you position your product and how you position your value. So I don't think personalization is going to go away. I don't envision a world where we're going to go back to this volume game. And so really leaning into that skill and developing that skill is going to be super relevant, not only for now, but for your future and your future career.
No, I love that insight. And it goes back to what we've talked about that sellers are never going to be entirely replaced by AI because there's an art to this madness that we all have to weigh these various signals and factors in here. So, in the interest of time, we've got more questions than we have time for. So, I'm going to go a little bit faster, kick up the pace a little bit. And for anyone's questions we don't get the chance to, more than happy to follow up based on today's conversations. What I'm seeing up here next is from Zach and Sean. It looks like this one's associated to you with 6,000 accounts for each of your team members. How many accounts do they apply into your personalization layers? And secondarily, how are they measuring down how to weigh those?
So when we think about the 6,000 accounts, how they're prioritizing that is we've got a tiering system, right? So our RevOps team is tiering our accounts based on our ICP. Carli is saying everything has to be based on your ICP. But you've got to know what industry your solution works best in with what personas and everything like that. So really defining that ICP to whittle down those accounts. So they're very focused on their tier 0 accounts, which is probably roughly 400, which is still a ton, right? So how do we whittle down that 400 now? Is by doing research on these accounts, looking for funding rounds, looking for product launches, looking for acquisitions, mergers, and stuff like that, that are good indicators as to that they have money that they can spend. And then further whittling that down to personalization, right? When we think about it, when they're doing that outreach, I think the best way to do it and scale it is above the line and below the line, right? Below the line, really, you should not be focusing too much of your efforts on personalization. For example, LeadIQ, we're targeting SDR and BDR leaders, but sometimes we reach out to individual contributors, right? So for that, I don't want my team going in there and looking what they had for breakfast and trying to personalize it and all of that stuff. But then when we think about above the line, when I'm reaching out, for example, I was an enterprise BDR at Salesforce. If I'm going to reach out to a CIO at one of the largest health systems in the country, I better know what I'm freaking talking about. I better understand the challenges that they're facing. I better understand what personalization will actually be relevant to that specific person. So if I'm mentioning a news article, it's somewhat tied to my product. If I'm mentioning a LinkedIn post, it has to be relevant to why I'm reaching out. So I think that's the issue with personalization today is everyone's just like, hey, notice you went to CU Boulder. By the way, I sell this, right? That doesn't matter. Throw it in the PS, right? Throw in the PS to make that person know that message is for them, but that's not going to be the reason why they booked that call. So I think it's really important and spending that 3 minutes, right? If you can't find anything in 3 minutes, stop, go, move on to the next one. There's enough fish in the sea for you to get to your number. So you don't need to be harping it on every single prospect.
Awesome. Thanks
That
so
was a
much.
long-winded response. Sorry, Jacob.
No, you're all good. It touches on the next question I was looking at from Tour, talking about so much terrible and scraped AI generated content. First, I want to say thank you to our guests here, Carlie, Casey. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Sean, it's always a pleasure. As you can see down at the bottom, our next webinar is going to be talking about how our cold outreach workshop, which we're calling Build My Pitch, will be opportunity for you to submit your pitches and have us rework them live and on the set. But again, Carlie, Casey, thank you so much for your time today. And for folks who had questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, we will follow up. Like I said, be on the lookout for an email tomorrow with a recording of this session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Well,